This video is brought to you by BenQ, whom provided the EW3280U monitor for today's collaborative video. Hello, Meoni here, and welcome back to a video type that I don't usually do, but recently when I was approached by BenQ to potentially try out a brand new monitor, it dawned on me my PC setup is changing this August, with over 2 years of savings being put into this new PC so I can make videos faster and with better quality for YouTube. I have an internet upgrade coming in July to actually bring us into the world of fiber optic internet and all that glorious streaming capability that it will hopefully mean. But I completely forgot to invest into a new monitor, so this is truly a very cool bit of timing indeed. And wow, what a sexy piece of hardware this monitor is. This is the 60Hz refresh rate 32-inch BenQ EW3280U. This is a 3840 by 2160 4K UHD monitor with HDR and FreeSync and 95% DCI-P3 color gamut. With their Hdr I technology bringing intelligent lighting to the games you play on this bad boy, of which we're going to show in this video. So let's first hop into the world of actually setting this up. So as you can see, the monitor is a pretty heavy fella, but I managed to put this together quite easily on my own here. The metal stand and support is nice and sturdy and slides into the bracket here, fastening nice and tight with some screws. It feels very sturdy, and I actually like this because I've had so many plastic-based monitors in the past that just sort of wobble around, and I've even had stands crack on me after a while just from bearing its own weight for so many years. So to see actual metal is a very good sign indeed. It's quite rare in my opinion. So as you can see here, what came out of the box is this silicon thing. At first I thought that was something you put inside the monitor, but it turns out to be a remote stand. This is actually the bracket that connects the stand, the base there, the metal base, to the monitor. We have ourselves a HDMI cable here. We have some driver discs at the front there. We've got a power cable for Europe. They of course included a UK one, and we also have a USB Type-C cable here, which is obviously quite useful and carries a charge, so we can charge things up from the monitor if we wish to. The monitor was very easy to set up, especially using their quick start guide, as you can see here. And as we move to look at the actual monitor, you'll notice that you can actually lean the monitor back and forward at certain degrees. This is incredibly useful and obviously helps you not crane your neck depending on how you want your monitor to be set up. The monitor's I/O then has multiple ports. We have HDMI 1 and 2 and a display port, as well as a USB 3.1 Type-C port. There's also a headphone jack if you want to use this with consoles and you want to use its port for headphones or any other speaker systems. So now it's actually set up. Let's go and dust off those finger marks that I put on the surface here and give it a whirl. Right, so the first thing I wanted to test was Red Dead Redemption 2 on my PlayStation 4 Pro enabled in 4K mode. This is something that I've wanted to see in person for ages. A lot of people rave about how good this game looks in 4K. So we're going to have a series of PC tests as well later, but I really wanted to hook the PS4 up to this and try out a couple of things. Of course, the footage of this iPhone camera is not going to give it that much justice for any of this playtesting, but hopefully it'll give you a rough idea. Just imagine that this looks as good as it does in my eyeballs, which, I don't have an expensive camera to use here, so we're just going to have to do with what we have. The first thing then you notice on this monitor is the incredibly tiny bezel. This is a practically bezel-less monitor with this ocean of screen space practically begging to have your games fill it. It's an IPS panel giving us wider viewing angles from different directions and pretty outstanding color accuracy and screen consistency. It has 24p frame rate mode for cinematic experiences. So if you actually wanted to watch movies how they were originally shot on camera, then you could totally do that. This is a feature that I probably won't make the most of, but it's there if you want to make use of it. You'll also notice the pretty hefty soundbar on the front of the monitor here to the bottom. This is where the tasty Trevolo built-in speakers go to work. I don't usually have speakers on my PC setup, so this could be more of a PS4 thing for me when I've got it hooked up to this, but they do sound pretty nice. So there's a good range of settings too, with the cinema mode and your usual pop, live music mode, dialogue mode, which could be, I guess, useful for listening to my tea time episodes or other podcasts, a rock mode and game mode, which BenQ tout as a way to locate your enemies effectively. Man, that brings me back to the days of Call of Duty, where you used to have these big headphones for listening for footsteps in the distance to predict where the dude was, and people used to moan how advantageous that was. But I think that's still a thing today. I don't really play that many shooter games, if I'm honest with you. To help demonstrate the sound then, let's give you a burst of Final Fantasy VII Remake then from the intro, with that soundbar showing what it's worth. But as you could probably hear, it sounds pretty good. You know, the speakers, they're never going to beat a good set of headphones, in my own opinion. I use some AKG K240 studio headphones, so obviously the speakers aren't going to be able to match up to that. But it's nice to have, you know, the ability to play some music, and usually I use it for YouTube. And during some of the tests, I did try it out with some YouTube tracks that we can't play because of copyright issues, that sound pretty good, actually. It's quite nice. On one of the settings, the live music one, it's quite bassy, which I quite like as well. In conjunction with some speakers as well, I think this would sound pretty damn good. Alright, let's get to the actual bits that blow my mind silly. This media remote, this thingy is on its bed of silicon happiness here, has several buttons that you can use to enhance the on-screen experience. Firstly, this big old Hdr I button. This allows you to toggle between off, which is your SDR mode, HDR, Hdr I Cinema, and Hdr I Game. Now these settings become available in the situations where you can use them. Now, of course, it has simulated as well. I think it's called emulated HDR, as well as actual HDR, if the signal going to the monitor is actually a HDR signal. So, of course, you need HDR-enabled games or whatever to provide that signal input, or, of course, a computer that has that as well. Or, of course, you can do that from individual games on the PC as well. But for the PlayStation 4, we have that from a number of games, including Red Dead Redemption 2. Thankfully, Red Dead has this capacity, so let's show this off. Similar scenes then, side by side. I edited basically this scene, overlapped a bit. It's very difficult on this camera to really tell the difference. Unfortunately, my iPhone wasn't playing that nicely with me here. It's the best I've got. It's either this or a GoPro, but again, you're going to have the same issue here. But basically, I mean, in real life, to my eyes, you can see vast changes between the two, especially between HDR and HDR I. I think when it comes down to the differences between HDR and HDR I, less obvious perhaps than you can see if you were to have just a standard definition signal than a HDR signal, but you can see quite a few differences in certain darker areas of the game world. So in Red Dead, we have places under the bridge or shadows from trees, and the real difference is that with HDRI you get that improved contrast, a better reveal of details as you move around, and a much greater saturation of colors. With HDRI you're getting clarity adjustments on the fly, vivid colors all controlled by intelligent systems that actively alter things in real time as you continue your experience depending on what happens. It's quite nice actually when you have a place that's designed to be dark and actually looks dark. That's one of the things that annoys me about experiences where they design a dark room with no light sources apart from a window, and you don't get that sort of feeling. So this could be really good in horror games and things like that, adding that extra amount of immersion. But in Red Dead here, it looks really good as well. One of the nicest features for me though is that the monitor will detect the ambient light levels in your environment and actually dim the screen and adjust brightness so that you don't get advanced amounts of eye strain, which is part of their eye care initiative that you can turn on and off. This reduces the damaging blue lights that can damage your eyes after long periods of time staring at a screen, and this is more important, I think, if you were to use this on your PC than you would with a PlayStation, because obviously you're going to be a lot closer to it. But it's there as well, which is quite nice, and there's lots of different toggleable things you can turn on and off pretty much all of this stuff as well, which is really good. You're not forced to experience all of this at once. It's fair to say then that since this is my first 4K monitor, the first one I've ever had the privilege of being sat behind, then I'm probably a little overwhelmed and a bit giddy about all of the neat toys being shown to me at once. And that's a fairly accurate statement, you wouldn't be wrong in saying that. I've lived with the idea that 4K wasn't necessary for the longest time, and I probably wouldn't make that much use of it. And obviously the price point is something that's always put me off as well before, as well as many other consumers away from this tech upgrade like 4K. But retailing at about £739 in the UK from Amazon and places like that, so that's about $799.99 in the US. It doesn't actually come in too steep if you consider what you actually get for your money. A lot of the competition that I've seen with a feature set as rich on paper as this is easily close to the $1,000 mark. So moving on to another HDR enabled PS4 game. Whilst we're here, we might as well check it out. We're going to check out Stranding in 4K in Hdr I Mode, and really this should show off a lot more to me. This is a game that I absolutely adored when it came out, and I spent a lot of time in it, so it should give me a good demonstration of what it actually looks like in comparison from memory. So at the moment it's adjusting everything to be a lot brighter than perhaps it usually would, but we're not in the heart of this rainstorm here with a BT, if you're not familiar with that, with the between things. I'm not going to spoil the game for you, but I would highly recommend you play Stranding. It's one of the, I don't know, honestly at this point I would probably compare it to a masterpiece. It was one of the most engaging stories I've played through in recent times for sure. But look at that, as the rain starts to come in now, as things starting to darken down, we're getting much more emphasis on the dark areas of the scene in front of us, especially as this cutscene sort of plays through here with our encounter. All of those raindrops as well looking incredible from the timefall there. So here we are, a bit more driving footage. I completed my highway, or nearly completed it. I think there was like 2 bits left before I ended up not playing the game much more past that point. But basically it allows you to travel across the entire game world. I thought this would be a good bit of kind of non-spoilery footage to show you. Nothing story related, just to show you what the world looks like in HDRI and 4K, which is absolutely beautiful. Look at how lush that grass is. Now the game does suffer a little bit from pop-in, but what game doesn't these days? But yeah, it really looks quite impressive as we're going across here. Obviously the weather is slightly changing the atmosphere of the area. Look, getting this slight foggy area. Honestly, outside of this footage, it doesn't look as drastic as this. There's a lot less pop-in. As you can imagine, it's mostly my camera's fault, but you can see the light really being emphasized from the sun as well. That's quite impressive. So when it hits the side of a rock, it illuminates that particular portion of it. Stranding was really, really impressive to play through. I'd still highly recommend it, like I said earlier, but really looks quite special in 4K for sure. I love the way that they deal with the way that light reacts to different surfaces, and it's a good demonstration, I think, or at least I think it is anyway. But anyway, let's move on from Stranding. Let's try out another game whilst we're on the PS4, and that's The Witcher 3, one of my favorite games. So what I wanted to try and show you here was that this is just HDR mode, as you can see, so everything's very bright. quite overly sort of like overly saturated in a distance, including the foreground as well. There's a lot of light basically from everywhere. But let's click this button and put that on the game Hdr I mode. Give it a few seconds and you'll see that there are actually more dark patches and that light parts are actually much less bright but more detailed. It's bringing out the contrast of elements rather than just flooding them with massive amounts of light. So as you can see here, this is actually another scene, quite a beautiful scene. This is just with normal HDR on, so what you would get from a normal HDR signal. But if we put game Hdr I on, you'll see that that's the most vast difference we've had so far. Everything is much darker, more moody. The moonlight is covering everything, giving everything a blue hue, and it honestly feels more immersive, and that's really what I think HDRI brings over a normal HDR enabled monitor, that immersion, and it's really hard to argue with how beautiful that looks in comparison, in my opinion. So I'm fairly confident that I probably would buy this myself if I read or watched a review like this, if obviously I wasn't given one for free for video. But with my time with it so far, I've really enjoyed it, and it's really grown on me in a big way. So let's try out some more usual games that I touch. For this, we need to hop over to the PC now and to the meaty, potatoey goodness that involves. Okay, so now we're on the PC, we have a better range of games to show it on. Firstly, let's try out the main reason my channel exists, which is Final Fantasy XIV. So with 14, we actually don't have HDR, but we can obviously simulate that HDR by, just pressing the button. It does it automatically. So let's see a sort of look at that as well. You can see that even though it's an emulated HDR experience from this game and others that don't support HDR directly, it does seem to do quite a bit for the picture quality. It's really working hard to find the best way to display those darker colors and the black shadows. I do notice, however, that this game in particular doesn't really benefit from the dimming of the screen that tends to happen with the HDRI technology, as much of it sort of looks really great with the UI turned off, and it's really working hard on that, but the UI is quite important in an MMORPG, and if we turn that back on, you'll see that's dimming as well, so it kind of takes away from that environment. But that's literally not where this monitor shines. Stuff like MMOs isn't really, I don't think is really going to give you a good, fair example. It's really meant for those sort of cinematic experiences, or games where you're going to get a benefit from darker and lighter areas. Whereas with Final Fantasy XIV, we're not going to get that. It shines in fully HDR supported titles, obviously, and that's really where you should have HDR and HDRI turned on, in my opinion. Without those modes turned on, with, as it would normally be just as a monitor, the quality is absolutely beautiful, and honestly, it really complements the natural colors of Final Fantasy XIV, makes them pop out at your eyes. I completely have fallen in love with this. In terms of the sheer size of a 4K monitor, I have to say that the other draw to me actually is to use this as a daily use monitor, is actually to allow me to have a much cleaner workflow on screen when I edit in Adobe. I can put my clips and folders on other monitors and have my editing software sprawl out in the center of the EW3280U. This is making editing videos much better overall. And indeed, I'm going to be editing this video on that monitor because it's just giving me a much wider array of places that I can put things. I don't have to keep moving bars around, and I can have all my settings available to me as I wish for them, as opposed to having to, play dodgems basically with, sliders and things. And where's my mixer and where's my effects settings? But yes. And honestly, as well, for editing, it's going to really add to that sort of picture quality idea that I'm going to see every single last detail and see what it looks like on an actual decent monitor. And that's primarily due to the IPS panel really sort of emphasizing those details and allowing me to get much better visualization of what it even is that I'm making for YouTube. So in theory, I should get better ideas of contrast and brightness and what you might see on YouTube, so it doesn't look completely crap on everyone's system but mine. So let's try the monitor then without HDR or any fancy bells and whistles. How does it handle just being 4K and playing games like, I don't know, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds? I have the FPS meter on screen so I can monitor this. Bear in mind we're just using a 980 Ti, so not an expensive setup here. My PC is, it's getting upgraded in August for a reason. Basically, we died within a few seconds. So really what I wanted to demonstrate will be given by someone else who can basically play the game. We're just observing someone else. The guy who killed me, basically, he shot me as soon as I landed, is the way of things. But look how quickly you can see people in the distance with this sort of scale monitor. It probably doesn't mean a lot to you because you might be watching this on a 1080p monitor right now, but I can tell you the sheer distance that your eyes can travel around the monitor is so much greater than it is on a conventional 1080p. I know that comes as not really much of a surprise, but this is really eye-opening to me. Wow, that guy got absolutely wrecked, didn't he there? Jeez, let's spectate the guy who wrecked him. But yeah, you can see for miles, right? You can see in much better clarity. And if you did use the emulated HDR, you'd probably have places look darker, places look brighter. I mean, that could be quite a game changer. Me already, I can see if I was sniping, if I survived past the first few seconds and got a decent gun, I'd probably see for miles. I'd see things that I ordinarily wouldn't have. Watching this guy's feedback right now, watching his point of view, it just is night and day. It really is. I am just blown away that it's taken me this long to finally get a 4K monitor. I don't know why I didn't adopt this sort of technology sooner, to be honest. Oh, come on, you can get him. Was that a hit? I think that might have been a hit, but I don't think he's going to pop out again, friend. No, I think his popping out days are done. But really, before I get sidetracked too much, this is a great representation of it just being a really good monitor as well, without all of the... Ooh, that was a good hit as well. Without all of the bells and whistles mentioned, such as HDRI and stuff, which, you're only going to get the benefit of if you have that stuff, from a HDR signal in the first place. The emulated HDR is pretty good, but for the sort of stuff that I will be playing, it probably won't be HDR enabled. Oh, come on, that's an easy shot. Oh, yeah, look at that. Just a fountain of red right there. We get a couple of frame drops in PUBG on this monitor. As I said before, computer not the best, but it is what it is. We're going to make the most of it. It looks really good to me. Really, really, really exceptional. But the sheer size of this thing and the quality of it out of the box, without any settings or anything, is very impressive. And if you want to bring your HDMI signal, your Hdr I enabled games with HDR output, such as the PS4 Pro stuff like The Witcher 3 and Stranding and Red Dead Redemption 2, then you're really going to get the most out of this tech, I think. It's just going to increase your immersion levels tenfold. Yeah, really impressed with that. So fast forward, I've given it the better part of the week, and we actually have ourselves a verdict here. The BenQ EW3280U entertainment monitor is pretty much exactly what I personally wanted from my first step into 4K gaming, be it the crisp visuals when I piped the PlayStation games such as Red Dead Redemption 2 and just stared for hours at the game world changing around me, not even realizing half the detail was there previously, or the more practical use as my daily driven main monitor for editing on my PC. I have to say it's really kind of opened the gates wide for me in general to what 4K offers. I would guess that you could call me a complete convert in that regard. If you had asked me if 4K was worth it a year or so ago, I would have probably said a very different thing than I am now, and it would be quite a negative response. It's truly come a massively long way, and with more accessibility to premium tech for a non-premium price, in my opinion, I think this has done the job of convincing me of 4K's worth. Not just to make things look pretty and accurate and the colors to sort of pop at you, but the sheer space that I have to actually play my games and edit them and have things on the screen. The convenience is very hard for me to put down, much like when I first got my second monitor ever, when you have that extra space. But this time it's that your main monitor just grows in a scale of 4 times what you had before. It's quite impressive and very hard to pull yourself away from. I don't know, just generally I think that it's adding a more enjoyable experience and a more believable experience the more you mess around with HDRI. It just seems to take a few minutes to work out what's what, and then it actually fully works. But I guess that's how the technology works, based on what's in front of it, and it works out what the blacks should be, and blacks actually look black. For example, the lighting dances across the trees, and the way that the HDRI interprets different parts of that screen based on its lighting, it gives you a much more immersive and realistic experience, where you don't second guess half of the time any of the shadows, where normally you might go, well, why is that shadow facing that way? You don't think about that because it looks so much more realistic, and sunsets look fantastic in Red Dead. It's mind-blowing, it really is. So with that being said, I will link BenQ's product page for this beautiful machine, which also gives links to where you could pick one up in your own region if you so desire. I'd like to thank BenQ for this very generous outreach to what is relatively a small YouTube channel in a grand scheme of things, but you can be assured that I will definitely be using this every day going forward. And with my new PC on the horizon, I will actually get to do 4K videos, which is all the hype. I wouldn't ordinarily do videos like this, but when it came to, actually providing an upgrade to the service I can provide for YouTube, I thought it was a really good fit. And yeah, I'd love to do more stuff like this in the future, especially when it's such an upgrade like 4K. It really is. Anyway, thank you all kindly for watching this video. I know it's not my usual MO, but it is what it is. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, and hopefully I've brought my passion about this to the forefront. This isn't just promotion. This is me actually going, hey, look, this is actually really cool, and I'm going to be using it and sharing it with you guys. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.